So my name is Rob Nelson, exhibits curator at Stuhr Museum.
Cool.
The title of the exhibit is called Flash of Genius. It highlights the works and accomplishments of 3 Hall County artists who were photographers: Julius Lashinsky, Henry Locke, and Michael Murphy.
And I'm Chris Hochstetler. I'm the executive director at Stuhr Museum, and I'm here to celebrate Rob's great work with this wonderful exhibition.
So this is a large format process camera. Part of this exhibit, beyond just the photographs, is we wanted to exhibit different forms of photography and different camera equipment itself. This being our most extreme example from the large end. We also do go all the way down to the Brownie cameras that are handheld devices. But both of these would have been used around the same time in the early part of the 20th century. This camera is from circa 1900. The way that it would have been used primarily was for advertisements, for newspapers. It shot into what was called a lithofilm, which had the ability to create high contrast black and white images. Something like a movie poster would have been common. Something like a black and white ad in a newspaper also would have been common, something along those lines. I also, in my research, did find one that was the same brand, which is R.R. Robertson, a process camera that was used in a museum in Chicago that used the camera specifically to document photographs in their museum collection. So that was kind of a unique bit of history that I did find regarding this camera specifically.
And Rob, what I find amazing about this particular piece is just the sheer enormity of it. It's big. I mean, this is probably 15, 20 feet long. And then the process itself is fairly complex with the glass plates and how an image was captured. And you look at this piece and the ingenuity of it, and you consider that this piece was not, it wasn't a real far distance from when photography first came into being in the 1820s.
Yeah.
I think the 1820s were probably when the first real image was captured or has been saved.
Actually, 1826 exactly is the first modern photograph that we have a reference to. Yes, there were much older versions that were a rudimentary form of photography, but in the real sense of photography as we know it, I think the first image is 1826.
So this amazing contraption didn't come along too long after that.
No, within the lifetime of somebody who witnessed that event. You know, if this was made in 1900, a child born in 1826, saw the first images, and then it evolved to this sort of technology by his elderly years.
It's an amazing piece, and as you get up on it, you see the craftsmanship, you see the workmanship, you see all these knobs and gauges, and then I look at these lighting apparatus, and you see where you can almost imagine the explosion inside when you look at it. It's all kind of gnarly and carboned up, and it's really kind of neat to see something this unique in a museum like Stuhr Museum, and it really is a showpiece in this exhibition. So,
yeah, I think to how this would have been used, because as you said, it is close to 15 feet long. How many photography studios would have been able to contain something of that size in a very pragmatic sort of way? And the way that they did it was to actually use it in 2 different rooms, cutting a hole in one wall and feeding it through. And having half on one room side and half on the other side, and one of the rooms at least would have needed to been painted black in order to really capture a clear image when you use this camera. So I mean, they're just the lengths that someone would have had to have gone through to use
it
this
almost
camera.
seems to me, with something this big and the way it's set up, to be a riff on that whole camera obscura thing, which started all of this out.
Yeah,
with the imaging. So
yeah, absolutely. I talked to a few experts on this sort of camera or early photography just in general, and they were of the impression that, with the exception of maybe just a gear or 2 here or there, just little pieces, it's as close to 100% original as it can be. This is the original rack that it would have been used to focus on. This rack weighs no less than 85 pounds, 90 pounds. It's really quite a remarkable piece in that, so much of it is intact the way it was. We have the original glass plate that would have been used on it, which and that existing in and of itself is remarkable, because it is just a piece of glass with wood, and it's 120 years old. And, the amount of things that could have happened to this, or the lens, or the lights, or anything that seems much more delicate in nature is pretty astounding.
Yeah, I find it incredible. It's an incredible piece. If you're an enthusiast of cameras, you have to see this thing, of photography, you have to see this thing. Or if you just appreciate something that is truly extraordinary, you have to see it.
Yeah. Just me being the person I am, I'm always more drawn to the history of any particular photograph than anything else. Yes, it's great to look at. There's a lot of great contrast with the blacks and the whites, and it almost kind of has a reddish tint to it when you look at the other black and white photos that are kind of near it, just because there is so much contrast from what I'm guessing was a yellow or a white facade of this building, and it just kind of gives it a little bit of color where there is none. But this, what translates to just German inn or German guest house, was a Hall County building that was constructed around 1880. It was only here for a few years. Detler Sass, who was an original founder, one of the 37 who founded one of the Hall County communities here, was the owner and the proprietor of the building. And there's just a lot of intricate little details that go into this photo that if you take the time to read it and kind of get into the nitty-gritty of it, you can learn a lot from.
And I think every one of these photographs that is in this exhibit, you have to kind of bring the same approach. You have to sit and study it for a while to truly appreciate what's in it. When I look at this photo, I see a ton of things going on, but of course my eyes are immediately drawn to the Deutsche Gasthaus sign, which is in German script, very distinct. I'm German background myself, go to Germany a lot, and this is the same script that you see in many German villages. And then right above it, you've got this almost Old West feel that says Wyoming House, totally different font, totally different feel to it, which is unique. I look at the top of the building, there's a guy, what appears to be a guy standing at the top of the building with his arms crossed, just looking down, almost like he's some odd specter, And then you look at the faces of the people in this image, and you start to really get a feel, just like in all of these photographs, a feel for the humanity of our community and of our county and of Grand Island. And if you spend time with each one of these faces, particularly in these old photographs, you really start to imagine what their life was like and what they were doing. And what I find truly fascinating is just not, some people will be drawn to maybe the austereness of the black and white, and they'll say, oh, there's a horse, life was tough, and some guys look a little rough or a little dirty. But you can see the joy in this image. And I think that in many of the photographs in this exhibit, you see the joy. You see the development of community. There's a couple of favorite photographs that I have in this exhibit that really are very artistic. Photos from the theater, or photos from the opera, or something of that nature, or the band playing. And you see that even in this time period of 1870s to 1890s, early 1900s, sometimes we look at that and say, oh, it must have been so rough. They didn't have this, they didn't have this. It was filled with joy and expansion and culture and all those things right here in Grand Island, Nebraska, Hall County, even as they were eking out this existence on the prairie, which is, I find, fascinating.
Yeah, I do as well. And I would just kind of piggyback on the idea of joy and just add pride to that list of emotions that are being, captured with a photo like this. We actually know who this is. His name is Wilhelm Shipman. He was a painter in Grand Island at the time. And he probably painted this building. And he's probably standing on top of it going, yeah, I painted this. And he wanted that moment captured for all time, at an era where, a photograph was a rare occurrence, and people came out to be a part of the experience of, we're going to be photographed to mark this, almost like a time capsule. And you see that across many of these photos, whether it's a storefront or whether it is the premiere of a movie, you have this tremendous amount of pride by the people who are working in an event, or the way it's set up, that we were here. We participated in this moment, and I think that really comes through.
And I think that the story of the photographers that are told, Lockie, Murphy, and Lashinsky, here in this community, the story that is told with their work here and their pursuit of true artistry. These photos are really art. When you spend some time with these photos, you're definitely going to fall in love with some of them, and you're going to want to have some of these in your home, which I understand that we can reproduce some of these photos, or maybe all of them,
yes.
and you could have these in your home. And they are really extraordinary pieces of art. There's one in particular that I know I'm going to purchase.
Yes, they all are available for purchase in various sizes, ranging from 8 to 10 all the way up to 24 by 36. So there's quite a bit we can do for the individual interest. I will say that the photos that we selected, we could have gone 10,000 different ways with it, because the vastness of each of these artist collections that the Stuhr Museum has are pretty significant. And we did our best to really pick something that would, be appreciated. There'd be something for everyone. It's not just all pictures of buildings in Grand Island. There's the arts are covered, sports are covered, storefronts are covered, advertisements are covered, special occasions, holidays.
Harley-Davidson motorcycles.
Yeah.
Very early Harley-Davidson motorcycles in the photograph.
Right next to a golfer,
to Robb. And the thing that I really enjoy about this show is I can remember, this is the legacy to community that folks like Lashinsky left. I can remember going with my grandmother when I was small, growing up in Grand Island. This would have been the early 1970s, to have my photograph taken at Lashinsky Studios here in Grand Island. So that was handed down from the man who started this in the 1890s.
Yeah.
And started his studio here, actually earlier than that, and then actually made a run of it in the 1890s. But handed it down to generations who kept it going. And it was the place to go in town to get a very artisan-style family portrait, even in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, and we have a display cabinet.
So this is one more of my favorite photographs in this collection, in this exhibit. And like Rob was saying a little bit earlier, it's that commonality when we find something in a photo that we're like, oh yeah, that really speaks to me. Well, the motorcycles in this speak to me. There's 3 Harley-Davidsons, circa 1915 or so. So these are some pretty early Harley-Davidsons. I look at it. I love to ride motorcycles myself. I love vintage motorcycles. I collect Triumphs, not Harleys, but these Harleys, are amazing works of art. And if you know the story of Harley-Davidson, it's a decidedly American story. So to see these 3 bikes in Grand Island in front of the Daily Independent, which you can get a lot of, there's just a lot about this photo that you can parse out and you can dissect and you can learn about Grand Island in general. But you see these 3 individuals, one being what appears to be a little bit older than the others maybe, but they're on their Harleys. They could be 3 guys sitting anywhere in Grand Island on their Harleys now. The only difference is it's, that many years later,
Exactly.
80 some years later. And it's an amazing photograph. You got a little guy standing here with his arms crossed, kind of checking out the guys on the motorcycles, just like you would today.
Absolutely. While Chris is drawn to the motorcycles, I'm actually drawn, again, as the historian, to the newspapers that are on the wall that people are reading and that the newspaper provided passing by. This sign here says the Independent Daily and semi-weekly as an advertisement. So it didn't necessarily come out every day, but just kind of speaking to that less rushed nature of the 19-teens perhaps. But it's not really visible to see what the headlines are in these newspaper front pages here that they're reading. But this is 1915, there's literally a world war going on right now. Yeah. These people are passing by potentially on their way to work or during a lunch break or something, just like anybody else would be in downtown Grand Island today, maybe looking at their phone instead of a newspaper. But, this was the equivalent of checking your Google News feed in 1915. And I think that's
And two things that sparked me. This guy's got a Harley Davidson branded sweater on, probably worth thousands today if it still exists. And this guy's front air pressure is low on his tire.
And there you go. And this is a Henry Lockheed photo. We did highlight Julie Sloshinsky, but this is a Lockheed photo. So we did have quite a diverse collection from all three photographers. So this is a photo by Julie Sloshinsky taken in 1895. It's of a Grand Island baseball team, as you can see with the letters across their jerseys. But what draws me to this picture, just being a former baseball player myself, is that not all of their uniforms really match each other all the time. And given when this photo was taken, and we do have the details on when it was taken, you can tell a lot about the game during that time. This is a time before they had really figured out what baseball was going to be in a lot of ways in terms of what it looks like aesthetically. During this time, this is right when they're figuring out that all players should wear the same uniform. There were multiple teams during this time who actually developed individual uniforms for individual positions on the field. So a team might have 9 different uniforms for one for the shortstop, left fielder, right fielder, etc. And it would be a huge hodgepodge of 18 players playing baseball. But the one thing that they did match while they were, not matching everything else were the socks or stockings at the time, or the hats. The hats matched or the socks matched. And you can actually see the history of this still in existence with teams like the White Sox or the Red Sox still having that name in the major leagues. It dates back to the late 19th century when that was very much still a reality that was being worked out.
And what I love about this photo I mentioned is the clarity of it. You've got so much in Grand Island here. You've got Wallbacks clothing on an umbrella in the background. You've got some spectators who are obviously pretty impressed with the baseball team, just kind of hanging around for the photo shoot. There's a horse in the background. There's a guy leaning on the fence, a young boy, just getting in the photo that, you can tell he's probably there to see what the happenings is, but he's kind of a cool guy. He's got his hat pulled down, and he kind of almost like a James Dean type character.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And then I'm wondering, is the field of play in front of these guys out here? So I try to project myself into a 3-dimensional environment and say, is this the field that we're standing in where they played? Are they off to the side on the bench? There's just all kinds of stuff about this photo that you can really imagine and place yourself in that place in time. And I think that's what these photos do so well, is they put you in a special place in time where you can let your mind go and ask what's going on around these guys in this shot. It's an amazing exhibit. You've done a really, really good job, Rob. I'm really, really proud of this one.
Well, I was happy to do it. We had a lot of fun. This one in particular reminds me of a Norman Rockwell. There's, this could be the spittoon that they were spitting their chew into, and somebody's dog made it into the picture, and this looks like the bench, and I would agree with you that they're looking out onto the field of play if that's the bench. But yes, please come and see this exhibit. It is open until November 8th. It is a great time. There's something for everyone, and I don't think you'll be disappointed. Thank you.